Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. I'm Daniel Berger. Today is a huge day for us with my next guest, Justin Stoddart, he's a sought after coach, a sought after speaker. He's a former luxury home builder, a land developer. In the titled world, he was top 1% of titled industry producers. He's the CEO of ProInsight. He's an international best-selling author of the Upstream Model. His podcast, we're happy to have him on because his podcast is a top 1% podcast, Think Bigger Real Estate. He's also the leader of a business that helps scaling referral-based business. I'm probably missing some stuff in there, Justin, but with that, I'd like to welcome Justin to our episode, and we're just here for having a nice little chat.
I
So
love it,
thank you,
Daniel.
Justin,
Thanks.
for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Super fun to excited to be here with you. You know, I appreciate your approach here, the adventures of real estate, because I've heard all too many agents over the years say, "Man, I could write a book on the stuff that I've seen in real estate." And better than writing a book is to actually create a podcast that people can listen to and hear the adventures of real estate.
I think I need to set up a conference call between you, me, and my wife because that's what I've been saying, and I don't get I don't get the love with that. But what's interesting is this actually started as I am writing a book. I've actually had my book's author has been on one of our episodes. It's it's actually my youngest son's was a senior in college. His girlfriend is an English major. Last summer didn't really have a job, so we're like, you know what? I need someone to write my book. And so we were actually later today we were going to go over another chapter. We're up to about 9 chapters so far. We're a little bit over 20,000 words. I think you need about 60,000 words for a book. So that was actually the genesis. And then basically I'm like, you know what, we should do a podcast as well because it is a way that we can kind of get cool people to talk about. But the adventures of as you know, in this world, crazy things happen. Um,
Yeah.
things from going into houses the first time with an owner who he didn't know, he inherited a house and there were skulls and guns and pornography, dead animals. We've had to call the police because there was the two skulls there. Um, Crazy things that one of my clients, I actually, my handsome self is a byproduct of Ozempic and Wegovy, and one of my clients was afraid to give her first shot of Ozempic, and I knew how to do it. And we're helping her move out the house, and I was the pricker, and I basically showed her how to do it. Um, so so there's just a lot of crazy things that are happening, and so I am writing a book, and the podcast is about the lighter side of things. Sometimes it's a little bit not so light, but they're trying to kind of make it kind of cool or at least interesting of some of the things that we have to do in our day-to-day job.
Hmm. And I like it.
So
Those are some great stories. I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. You got to tell us when this book is released, Daniel.
my wife is like, oh, I can't believe it. But I was actually going to name the book and another thing, Fatso, and I actually was almost going to do the podcast that because um, one of my clients, I mean, it's sad, but we deal with people that have a wide range of emotions, and the person wasn't exactly mentally stable and actually was bipolar, which you don't really know going into it, but you learn as it's happening. And I was helping rent an apartment. I didn't, and she basically was railing on the owner to me in like 13 voicemails in a row. And on the last voicemail, she starts off the call in a raspy New York voice, and she's like, "And another thing, Fatso." And she's not ranting about me. She's ranting about, I'm just like the conduit for her to get the information to the owner. And what's also interesting is that owner owned a famous strip club in New York City, and there's a lot of stories with that she kept on sending me like links to the New York Post about the owner. He was the nicest guy. so easy to deal with, but he had a past. And I'm like, I don't really care about people's past. To me, he's a gentleman and all this other stuff. But and another thing, Fatso, I saved that voicemail and I still have it. And my kids like die, right? They're like, so I kind of wanted to call the podcast and another thing, Fatso in the book, but I felt that it takes too long to explain what that is, and maybe it's funnier to me than it would be to other people.
It's a great intro to a book about the adventures of real estate. I think you could title a chapter. And another thing,
Well,
Fats.
it's definitely a chapter, so I definitely did that, and actually, we took that voicemail that was left for me and transcribed it. So the last part of the chapter is actually the entire voicemail that she left for me. Which
That's
people
good
don't,
stuff. Hey,
and I, we always people talk about how they identify themselves. I still identify myself as a fat guy because that's what I'm used to. I've been fatter, at least in my head, longer than I have. And I wouldn't say that I'm not fat now. I'm just Ozempic has made me less fat. That's how I feel. So I didn't have a problem with being called it. It was just more hilarious. And so,
that's
but
funny.
yeah, so and another thing, Fatso. Um, so Justin, so tell me, what are some of your adventures and some of your crazy things that have come along the way with you're like a Renaissance man with all the different you know uh um forays into business that you've done.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My I've got some funny stories as a luxury high-end home builder. Some of which are just have to do with couples who are so lovely to each other until you get mid-project, and pretty soon they're full out fighting. And I'm like, I feel super awkward here in this situation. I'm sure that's not an uncommon thing when it comes to actually helping people buy and sell property as well. But where it's like, oh my God, like, should I separate these two, right? Or can I just like melt away and not be here because the language that they're using at each other, right, is just completely uncomfortable to everybody involved. So anyway, I do have some stories around that have faded into the past. It's been almost 15 years now since I was a high-end home builder. In fact, a little over that. And yeah, so that was a fun run. For almost a decade, I was a high-end home builder. But in that process, what I learned and what's led me now to what I'm doing, and I'll just kind of state by this why this matters, why this story matters, is that I've uncovered a way for a real estate agent, for example. And I'm assuming, is that your audience primarily, or are you more speaking to the end consumers?
That's the other reason why my wife's like, why are you doing a podcast? Who's going to listen to it? So ultimately, um, you know, with all the different people that are on social media is this great thing. You tag people, other people are going to look at it. So and then I'm really trying to organically grow it, right? So yes, it's something for real estate agents, but really, I've had doctors on before,
Yeah, cool.
an author. So it's really it's just really there just to
Yeah,
kind of promote that, different people who
it's
we're coming in contact with.
I love it. So I'll adjust my story to be more relevant for kind of a wide audience. But as a high end home builder, the first thing before you have any clients to serve is you have to get the clients, right? You have to get people to want to be in business with you. At the time I was 25, and I was, I didn't have a big personal sphere. I definitely didn't have an advertising budget, and yet I had been trained, for about the past number of years on how to build luxury custom homes. And so I stepped into that world thinking like, pretty confident, like I can do this. I know how to do this. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to get the clients. And so I, looked at my sphere. They were all 25 like me, and definitely were not referring me $1 million construction projects. And realized a local networking chapter, although was the right thread, the right vein, the people in that room weren't that helpful. They wanted to be, they just weren't, right? They didn't have the influence to be able to introduce me to those clients, nor did they just didn't have access to them. And so I realized that if a way for me to grow my business was not through advertising, nor even through my own personal sphere, although I was very much a relationship-based person. But for me, it was to create strategic partnerships. And I'll tell you why this is relevant to the consumers that listen to this, is that as a consumer, we prefer to, once we find one great professional, we would love it if they would introduce us to the next one that we need. and then the next one that we need, and the next one that we need. What we don't want to do is have to start from scratch and go read a whole bunch of reviews and hope that they're accurate and true, and try and find a professional to service us at the most important transaction potentially of our lives, which is our home, from just a website. And I mean, we'll do that if we have to, but if I had a choice, I would love to get it introduced from another professional who knows me, my situation, how I like to communicate, how I like to operate, and introduces me to somebody who he or she thinks would be the right fit for me. So if that's true, that clients prefer to work by referral, in other words, they prefer to get introduced to the next professional, the same is true also of professionals. We prefer to not have to spend a bunch of money on online leads and try and convince window shoppers into being real shoppers, right? And although we'll do it if we have to, what we'd prefer to do is actually to work by referral, where our previous clients and other professionals refer us frequently. And so that's
for your high-end market, what marketplace were you in? What part of the country?
I was in Utah.
In Utah.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's not the Field of Dreams model of if you build it, they will come. It's some of that, but it's really the networking to try to get your client base almost before the houses are
Yes.
being constructed.
That's right. Yep. They were not, they were pre-sold. In other words, I wasn't building spec homes hoping that people would come purchase them. Right. I was a general contractor for hire, so to speak. Right. Which they would develop the plans with the architect, and then I would bid on the plans and ideally win that project and build that home for them. So with that in mind, right, I realized that for me, the best way to grow was through strategic partnerships with those professionals who were what I called upstream from someone building a home. In other words, it was the professionals who were serving the client just before they needed a builder. Like, for example, an architectural designer or an interior designer, right? Sometimes met with, or even a developer from whom they were purchasing a custom home lot, right? So for me, that became the strategic partnerships that I wanted to create. And in that process, I realized like this is actually a really great way to grow, because instead of growing by addition of trying to add potential clients to my database, I essentially, if I can create enough value for that partner could then open the door to those client relationships before my competition even knew that they existed, right? And so that became really a theme for me in building out a custom home business. And it worked. Of course, in 2008, nothing worked because the market crashed. And I had a good opportunity at that point to ask myself, do I love building homes, or do I just love building businesses? Do I love developing land, or do I just love developing people? And it was the latter, right? It was developing people, not land, building businesses, not homes. So I took that, actually was recruited into the title industry. And on the premise that I think you're overqualified for this job was the comment of the sales manager, but he said, we're launching a Fortune 500 title company into this new market, and we have to have a different value proposition. We have to have somebody who doesn't just bring kind of the normal title company offerings. We need someone who's owned businesses or a business in the real estate industry who can relate to these top clients and bring them over. And so, excuse me. And so I began just teaching what I knew, which is how I built my home building business. And lo and behold, it started to work for real estate agents. The same principles applied, is that they had a book of their client database that they were servicing and staying in contact with and generating business from that. And there were other professionals who were upstream from that same, from a real estate agent, right? It could be a financial advisor, could be a lender, could be a property manager, could be an estate attorney. I began to identify that there were certain life events that were happening just before somebody bought and sold a property. Sometimes it was divorce. Sometimes it was somebody passing away. Sometimes it was relocation. Sometimes it was our family's growing and we've outgrown. It was a job change. There were these certain life events that were very influential to somebody deciding to move, right? And so what we decided to do at that point I mean, as I was teaching this model, is to begin to identify who those professionals were. And I began to interview those professionals. Like, for example, financial advisor, I interviewed over a dozen of them and asked them the question, how many times are you sitting with your clients in your annual reviews and learn that some of your clients are preparing to buy or sell property? And the answer that came back almost unanimously was more than once a month, but less than 2 a month. So let's call it 18 times per year. Okay. And I said, okay, great. So 18 times per year that your client database, right? Let's call it 300, right? Is going to be changing like their real estate, right? How often are you referring that to a real estate agent? And the answer was also similarly unanimous of like, I don't refer that to a real estate agent. And I said, okay, that's interesting. But at the time I was not a licensed agent. So they would tell me the truth. Like, so I said, tell me why not, right? If I was an agent, they might've said, well, because, whatever reason they were afraid, I would be there to try and get those referrals. But I said, just tell me like what, and he said, there's a disconnect between the way that we serve our clients and the way that a real estate agent solves their clients, or that they're serve their clients. So he said, we as a financial advisor, we don't have past clients. We only have clients. In other words, a real estate agent serves somebody for 3 to 6 months, puts them on maybe a drip campaign, right? Tries to stay in touch with them, typically doesn't do a great job of that. And in 5 to 10 years, when they're ready to buy another property, then that person becomes relevant again. As a financial advisor, we're accompanying them every quarter of the year, at least an annual review, to where we don't have past clients, we just have clients. So there was that disconnect. And I said, interesting. What value would there be in it for you as a financial advisor to actually talk about real estate during your client experience? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, do you ever have this scenario happen where you're talking, you're in between, annual reviews with your clients, and they just call you out of the blue and say, hey, we've decided to buy a property. We're going to do it in cash. Please wire money out of our managed funds to this location. They don't consult with you. They just say, hey, unilaterally, we're making this decision. Please wire here. And like, yeah, that's a painful day, right? $500,000 that I manage gone, right? The other component is what do you ever find out after the fact, as a financial advisor, do you ever find out after the fact that your client sold a property and didn't tell you, and they had $500,000, let's say, sitting in some savings account somewhere? In other words, they didn't really consult with you on the best way to get a return on that. And they're like, that's another painful day. And so what if we could help you to avoid that? What if you always knew what was happening, not just with their money in the market, because that's your job, but what if you were to know that their money, or that they're going to be buying or selling property, and that they were going to consult with you prior to know how to best do that? That'd be amazing. Perfect. Now, this is why you should actually collaborate with a real estate agent, because a real estate agent could do something as simple as, prior to each one of your client reviews, your annual reviews, is to create just a simple equity analysis, right, of their properties. That way, when you're Mr. Financial Advisor meeting with your clients, you can say, hey, I have an update on what's happened to your money that I manage in the market. And as a holistic advisor, I'm looking at the whole picture. And I work closely with a real estate agent who's very good. They work well in this area. They've pulled some reports based on what's happening to your property in this market right now. And they're also giving a projection based on what they think is going to happen based on companies moving in or moving out of the area, like what's projected in our market over the next little while, how that might influence that. All of a sudden, that financial advisor went from like having the client say, why would we ever talk to our financial advisor about real estate, to where now that financial advisor knows more about their real estate than their own real estate agent. So now what's happened is the financial advisor has put themselves at the center of all things financial. So now those clients, when they think of real estate, buying or selling, not only do they think of a real estate agent, but they think of talking to their financial advisor, right? They think about, oh, we should talk to Jim, right, who happens to have this connection and knows a little bit about our properties. And now all of a sudden you're brought into that conversation, right? And so that simple scenario there is one example of a professional who's been working in the silo of financial advising or of insurance or of property management, who would benefit by collaborating with other real estate agents or another real estate agent. And in the process, they're going to learn in advance of somebody buying or selling. They're going to learn that that person is going to buy or sell. And that because they're going to buy or sell, they can then ask the question, do you have a professional who's already helping you? Someone who you would say is like a level 10 service provider, somebody who's great. Like the client might say, I don't know if they're 10, right? It's like my brother's niece's uncle. And yeah, like we want to help them. Would you be open at least having a conversation? Would it be helpful if I were to make an intro to someone who I would say offers level 10 service? Yeah, sure. We'd be open to a conversation, right? Now, all of a sudden, that other professional in a different industry can start to make client introductions to the real estate agent, right? And the same thing can happen in return, right? And that's really the mission that I'm on, is to say that, hey, everybody, clients prefer to work by referral. They prefer to have professionals referring other professionals. And professionals, you prefer to work that way as well. And yet the technology that's being built, for example, the company that starts with a Z that will remain unnamed here, right? What they've done is that they've inserted themselves between the real estate consumer and the professional. And then they charge up to 40% tax, so to speak, to have people who are looking at their site get access to an agent. 40% of revenue, right? So then we have to ask ourselves, well, how does an agent like reduce 40% of revenue? The only way they can do that is through volume and diminish service. So in other words, the client is the one that suffers from that, right? And so again, the quest that we're on is to really help professionals to get referrals from other professionals. And so we built a platform, ProInsight, which I mentioned before, that's really designed to do that, to help you to very quickly and easily put a team of professionals around you that then get the training on how to have these consultative conversations and actually have unique data about their client's real estate portfolio that allow them to create referral opportunities. So anyway, that was a long, drawn-out answer to the question that you asked. Anyway, that's the mission I'm on.
I've been taking notes, Justin. So while you breathe, I'm going to give you some of my notes are.
Please.
I think the entrepreneurial spirit is the highest per capita in Utah. From me being an old man and being in the solar industry and now real estate, and I just see that people, more so the people that are in Utah, care about building businesses. It's very important to them, and they do it a lot. And they build businesses, they sell them. They go into the next one, and they sell them. And that American spirit is fantastic. Where it's not like, oh, it's me. No, here's a problem, and I'm going to make it better. So the funny thing is also, you talked about the company with the name with the Z. I did personally $42 million in sales last year when it's like 65, wow. Just me, right?
Amazing.
Not my brokerage, me. And I'm now 8 years into real estate, and the Z is what got me there. So I don't pay as much because I do the prepay method, right? I would never do the postpay. The postpay is 35-40%. The prepay, though, is hard because there are so many leads. You have to parse through the leads, but you know what? You got to go with the lemon and make lemonade. And so I've been able to do that and grow my business. You'll like this. This Friday, my wife and I are having a dinner for 12 people at a very expensive steak place. It's my wife and I, and then 10 clients that are all connected together, where 2 of them I've done 6 deals with, and the other ones I've done 4. We've done 10 deals with the people at that table. And it's my customer appreciation. So it's a way that I can go thank everyone and get everyone into the room. So there's 2 that are related, and then 2 that are friends. The crazy thing is, the friends, I showed each of them, there's 2 of them, 1 property. one property. I actually didn't even show one of them a property because I was away. I paid one of my agents to open the door, show it. They wanted to put an offer. I put an offer in that night. The inspection was the next day, which I wasn't at either. I met the client at the closing table, like at the walkthrough before the closing table for one of them. And then the other one, I showed one property, and I'm like, this could take a while. And they're like, let's think about it. But within like a half an hour of driving away, they're like, put in an offer. We were the first people in the house. It just went on the market that morning. We had an accepted offer that day. We did inspections the next day, and I locked it up 2 days later on like $1 million home. So I am so appreciative of that. When they think of who they want to talk about in real estate, it's me. I will gladly drop upwards of $2,000 at a steak dinner for 12 people with whatever they want. I don't care, because that's one way to get away from the Z, right? So, oh, by the way, that's how I met them. Their first transaction was from that. So think about the legs that I've had now, 8 years later, 10 transactions later. And the client, Brian's a plumber. So now I'm also growing his plumbing business, because when my clients, when something happens bad on a Sunday, he goes there for the boiler, the leak. So I'm growing his business. He's growing my business. Right. And so,
well, here's the difference that between you and other agents that are maybe addicted to Zillow, is that you're leveraging Zillow to build a relationship-based business, right? Whereas those who don't have the client care and the nurturing system that you do, when you don't have that, then you're completely dependent upon the man. You're completely dependent upon Zillow to bring you the next piece of business. You've been wise enough to invest up front and say, Zillow, you're not going to leverage me. I'm going to leverage you. I'll pay you money, and then I'm going to take, and every time I get a lead from Zillow, they become part of my inner circle. They become
correct.
part of my client database. And those people might go back to Zillow to window shop, but they're coming back to me to shop. Right.
And guess what? So I do read the Facebook posts of in the real estate world, but I really don't ever answer them. I'm like, you can always complain about things, about what's happening now, what might happen. My view is just go do your work hard, block and tackle, worry about today. Zillow might not be there next month or next year. Okay, so then I'll pivot to something else. And so I do have multiple avenues to pull in new business. Some of it is my previous business. Now, 8 years in, I've averaged about 40 something deals a year. I'm starting to get to a very large number. And I know it's a large number because every Thanksgiving, I give gifts away to all my clients, because I don't want it to be that it's over. I want it to be like like your investment manager, where there's always touches and people can always ask me, do they need a builder? Do they need a plumber? Do they need a lawyer? And I agree with you. So people do call me the connector, because I connect the people and I'll only work with, top tier people. Like I had a lender once that I was shocked at some of the things that they did. And I was like, really? It's like, I've been giving you a lot of business. We've been working and so it like startled me that would happen. And the person was so myopic about a specific transaction that they couldn't look through through the trees to the forest. And I'm not doing business anymore with them because they didn't do anything wrong to me. They treated my client in a way that I couldn't believe. And I probably was more annoyed than my client was. But, it's all about the customer relationship, and you need to do everything that you can to, to satisfy and over satisfy customers. So that's so important.
Well, what you described is, right, you're leveraging the Z company, Zillow, right, in order to create as I mentioned, an inner circle. And really where my mission is to really help, whether you get that client database organically or whether you pay for it initially is somewhat irrelevant, right? but it's what you do with it after you have it. And what we believe is that by building what we call a referral partner network, in other words, professionals around you that service all of the needs that your clients will have, right? For example, you mentioned a plumber, right? Having somebody like that who you love, to whom you can refer clients, is amazing. What's even better than that is when that professional is trained, when they step into a house that wasn't referred by you or another agent, they can say, what prompted you to want to make these upgrades today? Well, we're doing it because we're actually preparing to move. Interesting. Yeah, great point. I do think that making updates to the kitchen and bathroom probably a great idea, right? You get good return on that. By the way, do you have like a real estate agent who you're working with who can give you some insight as to what other things you should and should not be upgrading prior to moving? Because here's one of the things I've seen as a plumber is that I'll have people come in and they try and update all kinds of stuff when in actuality, there's only a few things that really matter. The other things you probably shouldn't do because you won't see a return on it. You're really just, remodeling somebody else's house, right? And so, do you have somebody like that? Well, I don't know. Because okay, if not, if it would be helpful, I work closely with a real estate agent who does that. At no obligation, he'll come in and just say, hey, if you're looking to sell, I would do this, not do this, not do this, right? And you know those things in your sleep, right? And what that will do is it will give you access to those clients before they ever actually choose a real estate agent, right? So we're on a path because what many real estate agents feel like, Daniel, is that they're invited to a buffet. They bring the food and everybody else brings a fork, right? You've got all these other professionals that are dependent upon that. And we're not mad about it. We're just happy to have good professionals that serve our clients well, until we realize that those professionals could be trained with one or two additional questions to ask that could bubble up opportunities for us to the tune of a really ideal client every quarter of the year, right? Once a quarter. You have to realize, wow.
I'm right now working on, and this is the highest honor I have, is that somebody that I view is a pros pro title guy, the absolute hands down amazing. We have so many problems, he fixes them. And guess what? His good friend needs to sell his house, and he had me go there, and they didn't interview anyone else. It was like that was the referral. And think about how many real estate agents he knows, hundreds. And he picked me to sell his best friend's house. And I get that with Lori's because you know what? It's hard work. And I said, we talked about blocking and tackling, dotting I's, crossing T's. I do this. It's full time. I'm up very late. I don't really have I don't have a transaction coordinator. It's me because I want to know what's going on with my deals. And so I'm less into scaling my business because I know that that's a buzzword in a lot of things. I'm more about networking and doing it, and how I could scale is I can co-do things with other agents to help grow their business. But for the most part, I'm not trying to have so I'm the broker. We have 15 agents. I'm not trying to have 100. I don't need to have, if I did 60 transactions, I don't need to have 600 transactions, right? So clearly if I get bigger, then I can put other things in place. But I'm able to feed myself fairly well with $42 million in sales last year, and what those commissions can do. So it's not always about being the biggest, right? So I just want to be the best Danny Berger that I can be for my clients. And so clearly you've gone through a list. I love what you're doing with ProInsight, because you're really you're making everyone in that group, in that stream, look better, right? Because if this person can have a professional, that can have a professional, everyone gets it's right. It's like the waters rise, tides, rise for everyone, because everyone's going to now have this group of people that are all working together, and they're confident in the other people that they can refer to. Like for a doctor, I've never looked online at what someone's rating is. I need to go to someone that I trust and say, who do you have that's this doctor, that's that doctor? Same thing with a mechanic, right? So I'm lucky because I've had my mechanic for 25 years. They're actually clients of mine. I'm actually renting their house right now. So
Mhm.
you can't, like, that network is amazing. I don't have to worry ever about my cars being fixed. They bring them to my guy. My guy's going to fix it. And when people then ask me, I got a guy, and I got my guy who's fantastic. So, whether it's a stockbroker, a financial planner, an insurance person, the more networking and connecting that you can do. And so I love that you're able to monetize it. See, that's where I'm not smart enough to do that. So I got to toil in the world of real estate. So
Well, it sounds like you've done extremely well for yourself and your clients benefit from it. So I love the way you do business. I think you're wise again to leverage the big boys versus being leveraged by them. And then to wrap your clients up in a client care program and surround them with other professionals that solve all of their needs, right? It's really a winning strategy. And what we do at ProInsight is we just help people assemble that team around them really quickly and easily, and train them on how to look for those opportunities for you. So yeah, you're on your way of doing that. It sounds like you've got
it's
some great
also,
things
it's
on you.
stressful, right? Because when you refer someone, all I have is my reputation. And
Yeah.
it's like, there's sometimes I don't want to refer people, right? Because it's like, maybe that the person's, they're very anal, and maybe I can deal with it, but I know that this contractor can't. um
Yeah.
and also maybe there are people that I know that don't want the I have different tiers of, like, of contractors: high end, middle end, and
Yeah.
then more budget, but not bad, but budget, right? So
Mhm.
you have to make sure that you're giving the right client to the right person, right? Where if
Right.
it's high end, I can't give it to someone that's on the budget, because that's not he doesn't do that work.
Yeah.
Um, and then I know that my high end guy, I sometimes have to follow up with extra phone calls and texts because that's not his thing. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I know our client called today, and please follow up. But you know what? You just got to keep moving things along, and good things happen. You know, right? Getting your chance at the plate and at bat, only good things can happen. And so you want to get as many swings as you can, and properly, you know, be there. The caring and the empathy and the hard work, those are all things that are so necessary in order, when you're dealing, for the high end touches of client care.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I like the way you do business. No wonder why you were having such success.
So, well, talk to me now that I'm writing a book, and talk to me a little bit about your book, the Upstream Model. So, when did it come about? When did you write it? And talk to me about that.
Yeah, I wrote it. Again, it's the outspring um, of the model that I created to survive as a high-end home builder, right? It's creating strategic partnerships. So it's become now a blueprint, if you will, of how to work by professional referral, right? Any of us who are relational want to work by referral, but typically that entails working just with the clients, like our personal relationships, right? But when you take it to working by professional referral, you include in other professionals. And what that allows one to do is to not just grow by addition, right? One client at a time, but by multiplication. Because by, for example, having a tight relationship with your plumber and activating that plumber to ask a couple more questions at their client consults, all of a sudden you in some form or fashion kind of adopt their database, if you will, right? They're kind of nurturing a group of people and pulling out the opportunities for you without you having to market or sell to those people. The trust of that professional does that for you. So the Upstream model was written in 2020, and we had a little more time on our hands in 2020, at least at home. And so I really poured. In fact, I think it was released in 2020. I'd been working on the book prior to that. But that's when it released. And yeah, like I said, it's a blueprint to helping professionals who serve property owners to work by professional referral. So anyway, it's been kind of the keystone, if you will, to what we're building at ProInsight, is helping professionals to easily apply those principles.
Well, that's definitely like a how-to book, and mine is more lighter than that, right? Only because um, I'm more laid back, dressed down guy. Like, I value very much, like, I am, like, I'll wear shorts. I'll wear shorts sometimes to my showings, because ultimately, especially once someone meets me for the first time, because I view that they want me for me. And I love the
Yeah.
idea that I am very authentic. That is who I am. Um, and what you get when you work with me is someone that's going to work hard. I kind of know my business a little bit, and I will do my best to connect you to other professionals to get the job done. Um, and so so the book is
Cool.
more about it's the lighter side, it's the stories. One of the stories, the person that I ended up pricking with Ozempic, we actually had to go to a cemetery and with shovels because there was a problem with the deed with the deed, and they thought in the early 40s or 50s there might have been like a typo in a newspaper that seemed to show that there might have been another sibling, and that sibling would have been an heir, and their descendants would have been an heir. And we had to go see if there
Wow.
were any footstones to show that there wasn't an extra heir and it was a typo. It was pouring rain at the time. We're sitting there with shovels. You're not allowed to go to a cemetery with a shovel. There's like unions and stuff. So um,
That's funny.
it's things like that that you're just like, oh my God, but it's
I
been
can't
for
wait.
me.
I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to read it.
So it's been fun, and I'm trying to, we're working on our stories, we're working on the edits as you know, with writing and just trying to have something that's fun. But yeah, the adventures of a real estate broker, which is just, the trials and tribulations of some of the things that we do. So
I
um
love it.
what do the is evolving all the time, obviously, with things with the real estate, with National Association of Realtors, with the geopolitical environment. Um, you know, what you're a coach as well, a coach and a speaker. What do you know, how do you talk to people about, not being caught up in things that might be blockers, but
Yeah.
looking forward thinking, or looking at things that being positive and proactive and productive with what's going on and what changes might happen but might not happen.
Yeah. Well, I will have to apologize. This will be my last comment just because I do have a hard stop here. But I love the question. I do think a lot of people get caught up with who's in the White House, and that's going to drastically change my life. And there's absolutely, without reservation, that policies matter and have an influence upon our industry, right? So I don't want to downplay that. I will say that those people who are truly building wealth, whether they be other real estate agents or other people that are listening to this, they realize that, okay, the rules of the game have slightly adjusted. What are the rules now, and how do I win, right? And I think we just have to have that mentality of, it's much more what happens not only inside your personal residence, I think, as maybe Nancy Reagan said, um, it's way more important that happens there and inside this house, your head, for those that are just listening, that cause you to win, right? So those things matter, but if you can't influence them, you can't worry about them. You don't have time for that. And so do the best you can. And you'll realize that you have way more control and influence over your world than any politician ever will. Whether you like who's in the White House previously, whether you like who's in the White House now, whether what's happening geopolitically, of course it matters. There's lives at stake. There's things change. But for your success and for your peace of mind, know that it's up to you, and that you can win in any environment if you want it bad enough. So
I agree. Well, thank you, Justin. It's been great having you on
fun.
today. You know, a wealth of knowledge. You've done so much, and you still have your color hair and all of it. So I'll give you that at your young age. So I
Camera tricks,
appreciate
maybe.
it. I appreciate it. So for everyone, until the next time, it's Daniel Berger with the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker, and thank you again, Justin, for coming on this week.
My pleasure, Daniel.
Thank you very, very much.